Hello, everyone. Good morning, good afternoon, and good evening, and welcome to this webinar, or rather, this YouTube live session on what's the ultimate practicing strategy and how to best make use of error log. First things first, can you guys hear me clearly? Type yes in the chat pod if you can hear me clearly. Type no otherwise. So yeah, let me know. Can you guys hear me clearly? Okay. Perfect. That sounds good. So my name is Rajat Sidana. I'm one of the co-founders of eGMAT, and I'm going to be your main host today. Along with me, I have Deepak. I'm going to briefly actually add him to the stream. And Deepak is one of our GMAT strategy experts, and he's going to be your co-host today. In this webinar, we hope to show some case studies, although we're facing some technical difficulties. But we want to really address this question: what is the best practicing strategy for you? Which means depending on who you are, depending on what stage of learning you are in, depending on how you are in various aspects of the test, quant, verbal, within quant, verbal, various aspects. Should you be learning concepts? Should you be practicing questions? Should you be doing both? What kind of quizzes should you be making, and so on and so forth? This again is a fairly application-based webinar. So in the sense that the webinar works if you guys interact with us, if we get good responses from you, we'll all have a wonderful time. Otherwise, it'll be just a lecture, which is not so much fun. Having said that, I want to thank GMAT Club for organizing these webinars. These help us get closer to you. These help us understand your pain points, and then so we can invest in addressing them and hopefully help you get to your target GMAT score. With that, Deepak, if you want to just give a brief introduction about your background, that'd be great.
So, hi, this is Deepak Bansal. Am I audible to all of you? So, this is Deepak Bansal. I completed my MBA from IIM Ahmedabad in 2019. It's a premier B school in India. So, I have a CAT score of 99.25 percentile, and I'm working with eGMAT as a strategy expert. And today I'll be taking you to many people's journeys, and we'll be seeing how ultimate practicing strategy can help you ace the GMAT in the shortest amount of time. So welcome to the webinar and let's start.
Yeah, I think I wanted to emphasize on that last point, shortest amount, most efficient way. I think that's kind of our goal at eGMAT. That's why we build tools. And for those of you who've seen the reviews, you would have seen Deepak's name. And if you go look at eGMAT reviews, you would have seen his name, Dhananjay's name, Archit's name, or Nava's name in the success stories over there. So I'm going to, the first part of the webinar is where I lead you through this. And then the second part of the webinar, primarily Deepak would be the one who would be helping you with this. So with that, Deepak, I'm going to remove you from the stream and then we're going to add you later. And with that, let me start sharing my screen. And you should now be seeing my screen. Let me just hide this over here. So the first thing, I'm going to give you guys a poll question over here. And I want you to tell me, what do you believe in? And here is the poll question. It should be popping up on your screens right away, and here's okay. So this is a multiple response question, so you guys can choose more than one if you guys believe in it. The question is, which one of these do you believe in over here? Okay, let's get a few more responses. I have about 51 students over here. Just click on the link and you should be able to respond to this. Okay, 15 responses. All right, 16. Let's get a few more. Okay, guys, don't put your responses here at 20 responses. I think let's get 5 more responses before we move forward. 3, 2, and 1. And so I'm going to briefly share the poll results over here. These are how you guys polled, and you can really see how people have believed, or what is it that people believe over here. And this is, I mean, data tells a story, regardless of what you're talking about, whether it's about their approach to GMAT or their likelihood to success, or likelihood of success. So let's just talk a bit about it, and I'm gonna actually remove the poll over here, hide this back, so we have a clean screen. And in terms of data, essentially, actually, I messed up. I should have it open over here. Here's how you guys polled in this case. The most popular response was this, which is, I only need to worry about my accuracy. That's about 13. Remember, this was multiple response. The second is 12 of you, where you say higher the number of questions you solve, the better my ability will be. You have 9 folks over here. And again, even though these are not hundreds of responses, but again, it just shows the mindset of the group as a whole. I only need to solve official questions. That's about 9. I need to take at least 10 mock tests. Actually, that's about 4 over here, so not that many people. And this is about 9. And then in the other part, we have about 5 of you over here. That's good. I want to thank you guys for putting in those responses. The more data we get, the more fun the session becomes. The more you guys know about how other fellow GMAT test takers actually think about it. So this is what you believe. Essentially, the theme over here is the more you practice, you believe that you're coming in with this, is that, hey, the more you practice, the higher your likelihood of success. The reality is actually slightly different. Let's kind of take a few case studies over here. Here's a guy who wrote to us, and you can really see the date over here. It's about a year back when he wrote to us, or so. This is, I believe this is December, right? This is US time frame, Deepak? Say that again?
Yes, Rajat, it's US time.
It's US time date format, right? Okay, good, perfect. So so this was December. He wrote to us and he said, I've solved upwards of 12,000 questions now. I don't believe there are 12,000 official questions, but he's solved upwards of 12,000 questions, and he scored a 560 over there. And essentially, he was of the same belief that solve more questions, you're going to excel on the GMAT. Turns out, doesn't work for everyone. In fact, it doesn't work for a lot of people. It works for a specific set of people, but not for a good majority of test taking population. And we're going to discuss why that is the case. And again, this guy is not alone. Here are 3 other students who are there, who've been there in the same boat as him. Let me actually close this tab. These guys, you can see their starting scores, 640, 600, and 570. So the starting scores are kind of across the range. We have a range of about 80 points, but fairly representative of probably what this group is. Look at the number of questions they solved over here, and their targets. Actually, this is not their target score. This is what they ended up scoring over here. This is their end score. So solving more questions is not the recipe for success. It doesn't lead you to success, at least not in an efficient way. And again, for those of you who know about eGMAT, you guys know we capture a lot of data about you guys. We, on an average, we capture upwards of 2,000 data points per student, and it allows us to evaluate how you're doing. It allows us to give you that personalized feedback that we're known for. So, people do ace the GMAT. It's like, but what do they do? And here are 3 examples over here. Again, starting scores, you can really see slightly higher starting scores, but again, in the same ballpark over here. Number of questions solved, you can really see this, and you can see their ending scores. All 6 of these, or actually all 7 of those that I showed you, they are eGMAT students. Not everyone who comes to eGMAT succeeds, but a good chunk of them do succeed, which is why we have that many reviews. So again, you've got to ask yourself, what is it that these guys do? What did these guys do differently that enable them to hit, these 98, 99, or better than 99 percentile scores on the GMAT, despite solving way fewer questions over here? One thing that you would also realize is there is some correlation between your starting score and the amount of questions that you need to solve. But the thing which you're going to conclude, and what we've seen, is you don't need to solve thousands and thousands of questions to ace the GMAT. So practice beyond a certain point becomes counterproductive, not only because it doesn't lend to learning, but also because it leads to wastage of time. Okay. So again, this is something that we've learned. This doesn't help overall. Let me just make sure. So that's something that I want to really talk about. So now we talked about best practicing strategy. So in this strategy, we've got to talk about practice over here. So then, what is the right practicing strategy? So I think best is kind of an overused word. I'd say what's a good or a great practicing strategy, because I always believe there can always be a better practicing strategy in whatever I would give you. But what I'm going to give you is going to be one of the, probably in terms of today's thinking, probably the leading practicing strategy overall. So to do that, you've got to understand, what does the GMAT really test? I mean, we've been talking about this. But even before this, why is it that we live with this belief that practice, practice, and practice, and you're going to succeed? Why does that happen? So this is something that I'd love to hear from you on the chat. Why is it that you guys believe today that, hey, if you practice more, your likelihood of success improves? Let's kind of get some responses to that one. Why do we believe this in the chat window? Practice more. I'm going to. The more I practice, the more likely I'm going to be to succeed. Let's get a few responses over here. Because we've been made to believe that, learn from school. Because we think GMAT tests skills, and skills can get better with practice. Practice makes perfect. I think that's one of those things which is really, really interesting. We hear all of these things, and practice makes perfect is something that we've been hearing for a very long time. The problem really is we forget the context with these things. And that's kind of where my problem with when you take a saying and consider it to be a rule, that hey, this is something which is there, and I'm going to take this as a rule. And this is something which doesn't just lead to downfall of people; it has led to downfall of companies. 1930s, IBM adopted that you've got to dress up properly for customer visits, and somehow their intent really was to make sure that you want to make sure that you respect the customer. 1940s, that translated into the black IBM suit. And till about 1990s, everyone was wearing that. Doesn't matter whether you were going to a refinery to do this, which, by the way, IBM did not serve in 1940s when they put this practice in place, or whether you were going to a corporate such as Procter and Gamble or GE. Okay, so when you look at a saying, you've got to always look at the context in which it is said, and that's what people forget. And to do that, let's kind of understand, what does the GMAT test, and what kind of practice can help us succeed on the GMAT. Okay, and you're absolutely right that we've been led to believe that practice, and practice, you're going to succeed. Why? Because that's something that happens on a school exam. You practice the before this, and you kind of see a similar set of questions over there. That's kind of what happens in many of the tests. I mean, for those of you, anyone who's here and who's taken like Deepak, who's taken the Indian version of MBA competitive exam, which is the CAT. Anyone over here who's done that? Or anyone who's taken the classical GRE, for that matter. Not the new GRE, but the classical GRE. Okay. In the Indian version of CAT, in the classical GRE, what happens is the more questions you get right, the higher your score is. each individual question doesn't carry any weight. Okay, not the new GRE. The new GRE has been adopted more towards the GMAT, but the classical GRE, the way GRE was originally designed. Okay, so people practice. Why? Because they practice to identify which are easier questions. You solve easy questions, you get a high score. The key over there is that you don't want to solve difficult questions. Am I correct? The key to success on the CAT is, first of all, figure out how to solve easy questions, then solve medium difficulty questions. And if you have time, spend time on difficult questions, but only if you have time. Right? That's how the CAT works, right? That's the core principle behind CAT. The GMAT does not work that way. In fact, the GMAT works just the opposite way, which is why practice on the GMAT doesn't work. And Deepak's smiling over there. I'm going to put him on the spot because I've never prepared for CAT. I've only worked with people who prepared for CAT. I'll be very honest, and I think he can attest to it. That's how he prepared when he prepared for.
I mean, just by solving 20 questions correct out of 34 questions, you can get a 99% kind of.
Yes, and the 20 you solve have to be the easiest. That's the best way to get there. Figure out which one's the easiest, spot it, and solve it. Don't try and solve the more challenging ones. There's no point. Okay. So let's kind of talk about what does the GMAT test. And one thing that I want you to take away from this is GMAT tests ability. And I'm going to talk about what this ability is. And there's a very numeric metric to this ability. It's not just I'm talking about ability and it's a term in the clouds. No, there's a number behind it. There's a measurement to it that gets to it. Okay. So and the thing that I want to, what's there on the screen is really, really important. When you think about acing the GMAT, think about building ability. All of this stuff over here, you should worry about it, but that's 15% of your success is determined by this. 85% is determined by whether you have ability or not. And that's a very important distinction that I want you to take away. And let's kind of look at this. What I have over here is just a mock of how a computer adaptive test works. On the y-axis, I have the difficulty level of question. On the x-axis, I have the question numbers, and you really see this. What I'm going to do is I'm going to simulate two students on this particular chart over here. And this is just a generic principle of how a computer adaptive test works. The GMAT uses a slightly more sophisticated algorithm, but the principle that it uses is almost identical. Okay, so let's take these two students, call them student 1 or case 1, or student 2 and case 2. And student 1 or case 1 gets the first question. The first question usually, and again, usually was of a medium difficulty level. So consider about a 570, 590, 600 level question overall, or what's called as medium difficulty for those of you who have the official practice packs over there. Whatever is a medium difficulty is kind of what you get. The first question. This guy gets it right, then gets a second question, which is of a higher difficulty level. He gets that right as well. Gets a third question, which is of an even higher difficulty level, gets that wrong. Now gets a fourth question, which is of a slightly lower difficulty level. Now, how do we know it's a slightly lower difficulty level? Because if you draw horizontal lines from here and here, you can really see fourth question is between those two lines. So that's how we really know that. He gets that right, gets a fifth question, which is of a higher difficulty level. Okay. Let's look at student 2 or case 2. Student 2 or case 2 gets the first question, again, similar median difficulty level. Gets that wrong, gets a second question, much easier, gets that right. Gets a third question, slightly more challenging, gets that wrong. Gets the fourth question, a bit easier, gets that right. Gets the fifth question right as well. So if I were to stop the exam at this point over here and say, okay, exam ends here, who do you think would be doing better? Who do you think would do better? Student 1 or student 2? If I were to just stop the test here, take the scores that both of them had this point and this point. Student 1, yes, but student 1 would be doing better. Why? Because he got 5 questions. Each one of those questions were either at the average difficulty level, if consider the first question, or above the average difficulty level. Student 2 only got the first question at the average difficulty level. Every other question was below the average difficulty level. Again, their accuracy was identical. All right, both of them had 60% accuracy. They answered 3 out of 5 questions correctly. Now, what this means with regards to acing the GMAT, the takeaway that I want you to have is, when it comes to acing the GMAT, there are 2 challenges, or as I call them, 2 chasms that you need to overcome. One is to make sure that the test serves difficult questions to you, okay? Because difficult questions carry as much as 3x as many points as, or as many as 3x as many points as easy questions do. For those of you who've practiced in our scholar learning platform, you can actually see those points over there. The second challenge is to answer them correctly. So these are 2 challenges that you have on the GMAT. To ace the GMAT, you've got to do them. And you can really see, for those of you who have practiced for other competitive exams, what you're going to realize is these challenges don't exist over there. The CAT doesn't have this. There's no challenge where you say, hey, I want the question picker to serve me difficult questions. Why? Because everyone gets the same set of questions. You have those questions. You can go back and forth between them. Okay. Now, this was a principle. Now, this is real data. Now, this data comes from the older GMAT prep test. So mid 2018, instead of official GMAT mocks, we used to have a software called GMAT prep, and that was a really good piece of software. It told us a lot about how the GMAT works. And in that software, when a student took an attempt, what you could really see is what were his scores, where did he make a mistake, and then his individual ability scores, and how kind of the difficulty level changed. You could really guess that. Okay, here are 2 students. Both of these students, when you look at their attempts beyond question number 10, from 11 to 41. This was a time when the verbal section had 41 questions over there. Remember, this is pre-mid of 2018. When you look at 11 to 41, there's nothing to take away from between these students. Both of them have made 9 mistakes over here. The only difference is in these 2 cases, where student 2 has made 2 more mistakes. Now, if you look at their scores, you're going to realize, hey, they're very different. Student 2 got a verbal score of 32. Student 1 got a verbal score of 43. A verbal score of 43 is 97 percentile on verbal, which gives them, out of 200,000 students who take the GMAT, a rank of 6,000. So what the test is telling him is that, hey, student 1, you are among the top 6,000 students. Student 2 got a 65th percentile, which means, which translates to a rank of 70,000. Assuming there are 200,000 students taking the test, which was the case when these guys did. This year, we expect 250K people to take the test. So I think ranks would change a bit this year. How many of you, when you look at this, are saying, oh my God, GMAT's a really difficult test? How many of you are really saying, man, I make 2 more mistakes and I get dropped from the top 3 percentile to the top 35th to top 35 percentile? How many of you are saying that? Let's kind of hear from you. I have YouTube open over here because I get the poll responses much faster over here. That's why you see me looking at that. Okay. All right. A few of you are saying you do. Okay. Now, it's very funny when people think that. Why? Because a lot of people say, man, I make these 2 mistakes and I get dropped to this. What people don't think is, you can make 9 mistakes and you can still get to the 97th percentile. I mean, no one thinks that, right? You can make 9 mistakes out of 41, still get 97th percentile. What do you think about that? What do you think about the fact that GMAT's a forgiving test? What do you think about that? Think about it. Okay, now let's kind of look at these 2 students just once again. And what we're going to do is, remember we did this model of computer adaptive test? I am now going to simulate these 2 guys on this model of computer adaptive test. Okay, so let's kind of look at this. Let's look at student 1 over here. The first question he got was a 50th percentile question. He got that wrong. Or student 2, I'm sorry. The guy who got the first two questions wrong. The second question that he got was a 30th percentile question. Okay. He got that wrong as well, because of which the third question that he got was a 15th percentile question. Now, how many of you quant whizzes out here, those of you who are quant whizzes out there, this question is only for them. How many of you, those of you who are quant whizzes out there, can tell me what is the probability, assuming a bell curve, that a 90th percentile guy will get a 50th percentile question and a 30th percentile question wrong? What is the joint probability that a 90th percentile guy would really get these two questions wrong? A 50th and a 30th percentile question wrong, one after the other. Think about it. What is that joint probability? If you do the math, you're going to find is way lower than 1 in 10,000. It's less than 1 by 10 to the power 4. Okay, not 2%, not 10%, less than 1 in 10,000. Okay, it's less than 0.0001. That's how low the probability is. So at this point, the question picking engine that is there is not stupid, or it's actually very logical to really say, hey, this guy is not a smart guy. So the next question that he gets is a 15th percentile question, which is question number 3. He gets that right. It doesn't increase the difficulty a whole lot. Then he gets a 20 or 22nd percentile question. Then he gets this. Then he gets this. So by the time he gets to question number 11 or 12, that's when he starts to get more, the 700 level questions, which is when he starts making mistakes automatically. Student 1, on the other hand, got the first 6 question right. At this point itself, he automatically started getting the most difficult questions, and he continued to answer them correctly. And which is where his score was so different. The bottom line that is there is that when you look at these two guys, okay, you look at these accuracies. The GMAT does not do that. It doesn't look at these accuracies. It looks at abilities. So how does the GMAT look at these two guys? Let me just show you. This is how the GMAT looks at these two guys. He says the guy who scored a V43 had an SC ability of 95th percentile, a CR ability of 95th percentile, and an RC ability of 87th percentile. This is what it measures internally. These are ability scores that you get. And the guy who's at 65th percentile has these corresponding abilities. And because he had these abilities, these lead to a 65th percentile overall rank, or a V32. And because he has these abilities, these lead to a 97th percentile rank, or a V43. When you look at these students through your lens of ability, do they seem appreciably different? Do they seem different? Yes, no? Yes. That's what the GMAT tests, not those accuracies. Okay. Now, both these students were eGMAT students. This guy, remember, this was a GMAT prep mock. This guy had his exam a week later. He managed a V35, had a Q50, so he got a 710. This guy managed a V44, and then he got a 760. So, I mean, you can really see how close GMAT prep was to their actual abilities. So then the question is, what abilities does the GMAT measure? And again, so as I said, these are very numerical abilities. So what abilities does the GMAT measure? So your score out of 800 is composed of your two quant scores. Two scores, quant and verbal sectional scores. These scores are out of 60. And by the way, if you look closely, you'll also get those scores out of 100, which are your ability scores. There's a percentile number corresponding to every score out of 60. For example, on verbal, V43 corresponded to 97 percentile, as we saw in the previous example. On the quant side, you have arithmetic ability and algebra geometry. On the verbal side, you have SC, CR, and RC, 3 subsectional abilities. So overall, you have these 5 subsectional abilities. Biswadeep says RC is a game changer, isn't it? No, it isn't. There's nothing. There's actually, you've done simulation, and each of these subsections play an equal weight. Arithmetic and algebra geometry have a 50% weight in quant, and each one of these, regardless of the number of questions that are being served from it, have approximately a 33% weight overall. So RC is not a game changer. I can send you an ESR where someone has scored 0 percentile on RC and has excelled on other 2 sections and has gotten a score of 700. In fact, we'll be doing a case study later on where we do this. Okay. So how does scoring work on the GMAT? So you have these 5 subsectional abilities. These 5 abilities, based on our research, in fact, this research has been independently corroborated by GMAT Club as well, where you have these 5 independent engines, and these are calculated independently. So we did this sometime in 2013. I think 2016, 2017 is when GMAT Club did their what if analysis. So if you Google GMAT prep what if analysis, you're going to really see this. If you Google verbal workshop, you're going to see an article by me in 2013, which is a year before the concept of ESR came in, where we talk about abilities over there. Okay, so these are these 5 independent abilities over here that the measures, which means that, hey, how you do in SC has no relevance on the difficulty level of questions that are being served in CR and RC, or vice versa. How you do in algebra geometry and has no relevance on the difficulty level of question that you're served in arithmetic. There's really there are 5 independent sections, or subsections as we call them, because these are what we call as sections. These are SS, or subsections. Okay. Now, combining performances in these 5 abilities, you actually get a verbal and a quant score. So these scores over here, let me just erase these and see if I can really get a blue marker or a purple marker. These scores over here are outcomes of these abilities. Okay, and this score over here is an outcome of your quant plus verbal score. Isn't DS a subsection? No, DS is a question type in quant, which is you have a DS score for arithmetic and you have a DS score for algebra geometry. So I consider DS to be a question type, not a subsection, because it's there for me. It's under arithmetic and under algebra geometry. Good question, Vaibhav. Okay. So then the question really is, how many of you know your starting abilities today? Just a yes/no poll. A quick yes/no poll. How many of you know your starting abilities today? Okay. No, how many of you have a numerical, when I say you know your starting abilities, how many of you know that I have my SC ability is hold on, my SC ability is 30 percentile. 650 is your score. It's not your ability. It's your cumulative ability. But how many of you know these 5 subsectional abilities? SC, CR, RC. And remember, these have to be a score out of 100. Arithmetic and algebra geometry. How many of you know this? These 5 numbers for you. And how many of you never thought of it? Okay. Rahul says, I know it from Sigma. Rahul, yes, I recognize you. But many of you don't. So let's kind of figure out, how do you do this? By the way to get your ability scores, there are 2 ways out there in the world. One is you can take an actual GMAT, for which you have to go into a center and then order an ESR. The second way is you can take a Sigma X mock, which is the world's only mock test that gives you these ability scores. Okay. Verbal 40, Math 42 are your quant and verbal scores. They tell you your quant and verbal abilities, but within verbal, what's causing the verbal 40? What's causing the Q42? Do you know that? Okay. And Kumar Piyush says, do you mean that the question of SC on question number 10 will not determine your difficulty of question number 11 on CR? Yes, Kumar Piyush, that's exactly what I mean. Okay. All right. So we're going to take a case study and really say, okay, how if you know your abilities, which we can tell you how can you figure out your abilities, but how, if you know your abilities, you can then from there on build a study strategy, and then from there on you can really decide what kind of practice you should do, because ultimately, remember, the goal really is to figure out the kind of practice that you should do. Okay, so we're going to take two students, Abby and Chase, and for these students, we're going to figure out essentially what stage of learning they are in. So Abby is someone who, both of these students are going to start at a score of 600. Both of them want to get to a score of 740. Okay. Abby is someone who's a more balanced student. She's starting from a quant score of 42, a verbal score of 31. So Carlos, this Abby, when it comes to quant, is similar to you. Okay. Chase, on the other hand, is more or less like a quant whiz. He's starting from a very high quant score, a quant score of 49, and a verbal score of 23. How many of you, when you look at these four scores, identify yourself with Chase or Abby over here? And Rahul, we have a case study just for you. Wait. But how many of you identify with either Chase or Abby? Let's see. And write Chase or Abby if you identified with either one of them. Abby, balanced in quant and verbal, good in verbal, reasonably okay in quant. Chase, really good in quant, poor in verbal. Chase, Abby, Chase. Chabby, okay, Rahul. Rahul is good. Just Rahul, you just need to use a bit of the same flair on the actual test, and you'll get to a 740. Okay. So, as I said, we've got to dig deeper. Okay. So what I have done, I've done an overall I've done a simplification of this so that you guys don't have to remember a whole lot of numbers. So for Abby, her quant score of 42 is built on 42 percentile ability in both arithmetic and algebra geometry. Now remember, there are about 20 ways in which you could get to a Q42. I did not want you guys to remember all of these numbers, so I've just simplified this to really say 42 over here and 72 over here. To get a Q49, there are about 9 ways, and so we've just chosen one of those ways. This probably is not the most common way, by the way. 72 in a percentile in each is probably, I would say, about 10 to 12% of the students are in this. More people are good either in one, which is in arithmetic, or in algebra geometry. In fact, I've seen more people to be, based on what my experience of about 50,000 students is, people do better over here and then are not as great over here. So that's kind of how it is. On the verbal side, Abby is around that 60th percentile on each subsection, and Chase, on the other hand, is around its 35th percentile over here in each subsection. Okay. Now, here is a question for you. Do you really think they need to achieve that same quant and verbal scores to get to that score of 740? Do you think that's the case? Hopefully not. Do you really think they need to put in the same amount of time in quant and verbal to get to their target score? And do you think they should be studying the same content? These are 3 questions that you should be asking before you start practicing. Let's hear a few more no's. Yeah, it's very clear. And again, before I move forward, I want to ask this one question. How many of you have asked this question to yourself before you started practicing? Hey, what kind of practice should I be doing? How much time should I be splitting between quant and verbal? And what content should I be learning that helps me get to? Because remember, there are different kinds of contents out there. How many of you have asked this question? And no. And as Dhananjay says, no, I haven't. And so these are 3 really important questions when it comes to success on the GMAT. Okay. So to figure out what quant, what verbal scores you need, we built this tool called GMAT Planner. And in this, it's an AI-driven tool that has data from upwards of 6,000 enhanced score reports that allows you to build your own personalized study plan. And I'm going to share this link with you so that you guys can do that as well. Okay. Now, this is the output that you get out of GMAT Planner over here. So let's say these are your target quant and target. This he takes in your current quant and current verbal score, so you can really see this over here. Let me actually remove my video so that you guys can see this a bit more clearly. So it says, okay, this is, hey Abby, this is your current score, this is your current quant score, this is your current verbal score. It then computes, given her current scores, what will be the shortest path to hit her quant and her verbal to hit that score of 740, and it tells you what is her target quant, what should be her target verbal score. And then it also computes these abilities over here. Okay, so that's what it does over here, and it tells this for Abby. Then it says, okay, based on where she is, if she were an eGMAT student, it gives an estimate of the amount of time Abby would need to achieve this. So for Abby, she's going to go from 59 percentile ability in SC. She needs to go to 94th percentile. Given the constraints Abby has put in with regards to how many hours she can put in during the weekdays and how many hours per day can she put in during the weekend, it is estimated that Abby would need about 2.1 weeks and more or less about 2 weeks in each of the subsections when it comes to verbal, and about 1.5 weeks each in quant, give or take over here. Okay. All right. Chase, it's a slightly different story. Is already very strong in quant, so and you can really see he's not as strong in verbal. So for Chase, he should hit a Q50, play on his strengths first, and then correspondingly, the tool tells him that he should get to a V40. So what does Q50 translate to? That's the best way for Chase to hit a Q50, and that's a good way for Chase to hit a V40. That's a good way, and the tool does that for you. And again, it looks at all the various ways to get a V40 and gives you a recommendation that it thinks is more likely. Now, you can really see a certain kind of symmetry over here. These scores are similar, and these scores are similar too. Had these scores been different, had this been, for example, 60, 15, and 10, you would have seen a slight difference over here as well. The tool takes that into account, and it's intelligent enough. It's built on a neural network. Okay, so where does Chase spend his time? And you can really see the difference over here. On the quant side, he doesn't really need to do much. So it's about a week each on quant. But on the verbal side, it's about 3 weeks per subsection. Not 2 like Abby did, but 3 weeks per subsection. And this part is really important. Again, you can see the target abilities over here. You can see the starting abilities over here that have been put in place. Okay. By the way, over here, it also tells you as you hit those ability scores, how does your GMAT score improve from the starting score of 600 to I mean, this I think is about 710 over here in this case, or 700. So just to summarize, I mean, 2 different people, identical starting score, identical target score. When you look at what their quant and verbal target scores are, what you're going to find is, and for those of you who've taken the GMAT once, you would know aiming for a Q50 and aiming for a Q48, even though the difference is just 2 points, it's a very different individuals. Someone who scores a Q48 is very different from someone who scores a Q50. It requires a completely different level. How many of you over here are retakers, by the way? How many of you over here are retakers? Let's get some input. Okay. For retakers, you guys probably know at Q48 versus Q50, very, very different ball game. But that's not the biggest difference. The biggest difference is how much time they need. Chase needs to spend 50% more time on verbal than Abby does. Okay, 6 weeks versus 9 weeks, 50% more time, despite the fact that he has to get to a lower score. Whereas Abby needs to spend twice as much time on quant, despite the fact that she is aiming for a lower score. Now, for those of you who prepared for the test before, tell me what happens if you think you're going to be done with verbal in 6 weeks, and you kind of realize, man, this is not going to happen. How does that impact as to how you study? How does that impact? If you budget 6 weeks and you kind of realize I need 10 weeks, what happens? You move on to those no flashcards. Okay, when you say slips, one subject slips, and we move along. Yes, you give up on that. Now, can you tell me what's that score of 740? What percentile does that refer to? What percentile does a score of 740 refer to? What is 740? Around that 97 percentile. Around that 97 percentile or so. Okay. Now, which means if you get to a 740, you're among the top 4 percentile of students out there. Can you mess up one subsection in a huge fashion and be among those top 4 percentile of students out there? Can you do that? Maybe on CAT, but not on the GMAT. Can you do that? No. And that's what you need to understand. Understand what is it that you're aiming for. Understand the significance of it, and then make decisions while you're studying. Okay. But that's not the biggest difference. Still, there were two big differences here. What scores are they aiming for? How much time do they need to do this? Those are big, not the biggest. The biggest difference is where do they spend their time? And that's really important. Now remember that ability score 1 to 100 overall. Here is how what we call as stages of learning correspond to improvement in ability. Here is a y-axis. The higher you go on y-axis, the higher ability you achieve. If you are someone who knows some of the concepts or most of the concepts, just at a conceptual level, that are tested in any subsection, and a subsection could be SC, number properties, word problems, CR, RC, an independently scored subsection. In fact, even within SC, you can really branch it down to subject verb, verbs, pronouns, modifiers, parallelism, comparison, and to a limited extent, idioms over here. So these are subsections over here. If you know the concepts, you hit that 25th percentile ability. Now, once you learn how to apply those concepts, that's when you're in that 50th to 60th percentile ability. Once you master how to apply those concepts, once you know, hey, what do you do in step 1? What do you do in step 2 if you see a question, and you're really, really efficient about it, that's when you hit that 70th percentile ability. When you're refined to perfection, so going from master to this, refined to perfection, that's when you hit that 90th percentile ability. And then from there on, you've got to maintain performance. Now, a quick question over here. Practicing official questions. At which stage? You have the names over here. Learn concepts, learn application, master application, refine to perfection, and maintain performance. And if we were to do this in future, we'll probably have a poll question for this. But at which stage of learning do you think you should be practicing official questions? At which stage of learning? Let's just see. Should you be practicing official questions? And then I can really just name these stages. I can say 1, 2, 3, 4, and 5. Where should you be practicing official questions? Okay. 3, all right. 2 to 3. You can really say 2 to 3, 1 to 2, 2 to 3, 3 to 4, 4 to 5. Okay, good. That's good. So now you are getting that sense of the stage of learning, which is good. I'm very glad very few of you said 1 to 2. Okay, really, this is when you should be mastering using official questions between 3 to 4. Okay, you may use some official questions between 2 to 3, but 3 to 4 is ideal for practicing official questions. By the way, how many of you follow this? How many of you thought about learning and achieving an ability with this framework in mind? Just as a rough, you may not have the exact same names over here, but how many of you thought about this framework as to really say, okay, this is how I should achieve that level of perfection if you have to, that 90th percentile? How many of you thought about this? You're now thinking about this, but prior to this session, how many of you thought about learning as a stage of or stages of learning as a means to achieving that 90th percentile? That is important. How many of you, and this is something which is really important. Why? Piyush says, I did, but I only solved official concept. So even if you thought about it, you didn't practice it. And that's very important. And your responses, frankly, to that question over here showed this. When I looked at this, that's solving a greater number of questions, your responses to this particular question kind of prove that hey, you don't, even though you may know this methodology, but you truly don't believe in this. Okay. So with that, am I correct, by the way? So let's kind of understand, where does Abby spend her time? Now remember, Abby is already at that 60th percentile ability in SC over here. Okay. So where does Abby spend her time? Abby, because she's already at that 60th percentile ability, if she were to start afresh, she's going to confirm. She's going to spend some time in refining application. Maybe just do that in with regards to just a few difficult concepts. But a bulk of her time is going to be spent on mastering application and refining to perfection, and then on maintaining. But out the 2 weeks that she has for SC, the 40 to 43 hours that she has devoted for SC, she's going to spend doing that. Same thing with CR and RC. She's not going to spend time learning a whole lot of concepts. She's already at that 60th percentile, so she knows most concepts. But the key thing which is there is, as she goes to that 70th percentile, she needs those diagnostics, which will tell her which concepts, if any, does she need to revise. She needs that feedback so that selectively she can just view those concepts. Now, how many of you, when you started preparing for a particular subsection, really said, okay, I'm going to start reading a book and I'm going to start solving questions? How many of you did that? Hey, step 1, read a book or read some notes, and step 2, start solving questions. Let's get some data points over here. How many of you have done that? Step 1, read a book. Step 2, start solving questions. Okay. If Dhananjay, let's get a few more responses. I have about 95 students. Akshat. Who else? Who else did that? Divya did. Do you think that's the logical approach to doing this? I know that's how you've been taught, but do you think that's a logical approach? No, it's not logical. It's not optimized towards your stage of learning. Now, on arithmetic and algebra, where she's at 42nd percentile, she does need to learn the concepts. She does need to learn application overall, and then she needs to refine to perfection. Okay. So Kumar Piyush says, I did this as a common, because this is a common practice in Indian education system. Okay. Anyone who's a sportsman over here, plays sports, any sort of competitive sport? When I say competitive, not going to a club, but really at least some level. And I see a hashtag me too over here. Deepak's raising hand, but I don't want Deepak to answer. Deepak's there in front of me. He's like, yes, 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 I am. Basketball, badminton. Okay. Rahul, what level? Or Anshul, at what level do you play basketball? Or table tennis, Akshat. Akshat, I have a table tennis robot outside, by the way, against whom I practice. So for those of you who just tell me at what level, and then tell me when you started playing this, or for you to be able to reach a certain level, was it just playing matches, or was it kind of practicing each and every stroke precisely? I played competitive cricket. I was a part of my German state team. I played cricket in Germany. For those of you, some of you are probably wondering, hey, is cricket even played in Germany? Yes, it is. If you Google German cricket, Deutsches Cricket Bund, you'd really see that. But essentially, I played competitive cricket in Germany. I played even a couple of junior division county matches in England. And when I practiced cricket, it was more like I was practicing my drive. I wanted to make sure there's no gap between my leg and my bat when I drive, so that the ball doesn't sneak through this. And I practiced this not twice, relentlessly. Okay, that was the first stage of learning. The second stage was I practiced combined drills. I would have bowlers who would do that. Net practice helps you get for it. For me, matches came towards the end. That was the psychological piece. You build that psychological piece not early on, but towards the end, which, by the way, is test practice, endurance through that 3-hour test. That's something that you build towards the end. In the beginning, when you're building those concepts, you don't want to solve full length questions. You want to make sure that you're precise. So when you are in this learning concepts and application, you need that. You honed your serving skills. Akshat, did you ever have a coach? Anyone over here who's had a coach? And if you had, tell me. And Deepak's again raising his hand. I'm going to actually put him on stream over here. But tell me, what did this coach do if you guys had a coach? Let's see. What did this coach do? Did he not correct how you were serving, how you were responding? If, for those of you who learn tennis or badminton, is the weight distribution on both your legs okay? Are you squatting the right amount? Okay. The stance in batting, yes. Is the weight distribution okay? Are you too much on the front foot? Do you have a front stroke before you do this? You need that coach. When you solve an official question, how do you get that feedback? Because if you solve an official question in SC, it'll test you on subject verb, it'll test you on pronouns, it'll test you on modifiers. Right? How do you get feedback on specifically on subject verb or pronouns or tenses? Same thing in critical reasoning, same thing in reading comprehension or in number properties. And it's really important for you to recognize what stage of learning you are in and get that feedback that's specific to you, so that you can go from one stage to the other, one stage to the other, one stage to the other. And you should have metrics at each stage over there. So where does Chase spend his time? Again, remember, Chase is going to spend the bulk of his time in these two stages over here. Why? Because he's at 34th percentile. Okay. And of course, he has to spend some time here, but there's no point spending time here if you've not graduated from here to here. If you've not reached this point, there's no point spending going over there. Okay. And that's really, really important. Again, understand these stages of learning and understand the ability scores that correspond to it. If you have this one sheet on the wall, and if you track this, and if you're able to achieve going from one stage of learning to the other, that's all you need to hit that score. Why? Because if you hit your ability scores in SC, hit your ability scores in CR, hit your ability scores in RC, hit those in number properties, algebra, word problems, geometry, and advanced topics, which include sets, PNC, probability, and so on and so forth, you're going to hit that GMAT score. It's that GMAT score is an outcome. It's not a cause. The causes are these ability scores. You cover the cause, You get the outcome. That's the cause-effect relationship. That's causality. Okay. So with that, we talked about practice. Let's talk about practice. But hopefully, before we do that, is this useful? Is that helping you get there? Is this, I mean, is this what you came for? Or is this something that's going to help you become a better test taker? Okay. I wasn't expecting the kind of analogy. It's success in any field is very similar, guys. It's I mean, if you, and that's why people who are successful in one area are successful in another area as well, because it's the mantras for success are very, very similar. So if you like this, and I think it'd be great if you can provide some likes. That way GMAT Club gets to know whether you guys benefited from this. Okay. So let's talk about stage one of learning, and which is when you do learn concepts and applications. And Deepak, if you can pull up Hasib's account, that'd be great at your end. You have it. Okay. So what are you doing over here? You are in that lower than or less than 50th percentile. In fact, less than, if you learn concepts and application over here stage. You want to learn all the concepts. You want a system that gives you confirmation, that tells you that you've learned a certain concept over here. Okay. When do you do this? When your starting ability is, of course, less than 60th percentile. Why? Because if you've achieved 60th percentile, then either you're naturally good at it, because some people are also naturally good at things, or B, you've learned concepts and application overall. Okay. Now, how do you go about doing this? How do you measure this? And this is something which is really important. You need quizzes that test you on these specific concepts over there, and quizzes that teach you how to apply, which means they tell you what do you do in step one, what do you do in step two, what do you do in step three, so you need feedback both at a conceptual level as well as at an application level. Okay. Now, what evidence do you have that you've learned this kind of stuff? What evidence do you have that you've mastered this stage? If I can ask you, verb ed modifiers, under what scenario do they act as verbs or modifiers? You can answer this question. That's something which is there. The second thing, use of relative pronoun modifiers, and here is a guy which we rarely see as someone who comes from a competitor. If you think this is a time sink, then you can really go away from this. So yeah. So how many of you can really say, okay, when is the usage of relative pronoun modifiers correct? Under what scenario can a noun modifier modify a slightly far away noun? Because noun modifiers are supposed, in traditional concepts, are supposed to modify nouns just right next to it. In what cases can a verb ing modifier act as an action modifier versus a noun modifier? Okay. And some of these, and you guys can read this over here. Okay. So tell me, if you guys can do this, when you're learning concepts, how many of you, after learning concepts, can answer questions such as this in SC? How many of you can? In SC? After you've gone through, the book. Just simple concepts. I mean, first of all, are these questions out of the world? Or for those of you who've done practice, have you seen these things tested? Let's get a few responses. Akshat says, I can't. So do these things, do you see them tested on the practice? Yes, you've seen these. Yes, in a few questions, yes. And again, these are concepts. This is not, and when I say concepts, it's not about, hey, I know what a verb id verb ed modifier is, but in what cases do verb ed modifiers act as verbs or modifiers? And you've seen those. Those of you who've practiced, you've seen this as being tested over there. You need a system that gives you evidence that you can do this. Okay. So what kind of practicing strategy do you need in stage one? One, you need, if you are in stage one, the first thing is you've got to determine that you're in stage one. But if you are in stage one, you need to determine that okay, at various concepts level, CONC, you can actually answer such questions, and you need evidence that for various concepts you can achieve that level of proficiency. Within the eGMAT platform, we basically have what we call as scores against this. I'm going to stop sharing my screen, Deepak, so you can share your screen, and I'm going to demonstrate that. So if you go in Hasib's course, I'm going to add
Just
that.
let me know, Rajat, when.
Yes. So one of the things which is there is, if you, as you scroll through this over here, and I'm going to make this so that our videos go away. So let's go into subject verb and expand that. So, and zoom it in, please. You can do a control plus. So you see subject verb agree in number. You need to really, so you go through the video, we capture the amount of time you take to solve this. We then really look at how much, there's a pre-quiz, there's a post-quiz. We capture how much you've scored. So we evaluate you on subject verb agree in number. Subject verb makes sense. Always subjects that are always singular. We not only teach you what they are, but we tell you whether you know this. We evaluate you on that. Words that change number. Now, beyond that, we also then give you questions in a concept quiz, which is 2.5 over here, where we tell you, okay, how well have you done this? And you can really see the time captured. Now, where you see the video icon over here, so 2.6 or 2.4, 2.3, 2.2, 2.1, these are all video files. We built technology that captures this data from within the video. So you have an uninterrupted learning piece. Then we teach you, remember, the first stage is learn concepts and application. You have a specific application for subject verb over here. So you're not just learning concepts in subject verb. Once you've learned concepts, we teach you how to apply that in subject verb. And then we teach you how to, we actually evaluate your ability to apply this. Let's kind of go into the verbs module over here. Same thing in verbs. You can really see verb tenses 1, 2. We have verb sequences over there. Again, you have practice, verbs application. This is a guy who actually scored, Hasib scored what, 730, 740? What was it? And this guy got into Cornell, by the way. Is this, okay, then what's the source of question? It's all eGMAT quizzes, eGMAT experts. We have, how many read? I'm looking at the board. We have about 12 people who work full-time as subject matter experts over there. We created all of this. When we say in just the first stage of learning, which is learn concepts and application, you get 87 personalized feedback points for your this thing. Okay. Now look at modifiers. Again, the same thing. We talked about a bit of modifiers. Let's go to modifiers over here. It's a foundational lesson on modifiers. Then we tell you what are the various types of modifiers over here. What are the various errors in modifiers? We talked about verb ed modifiers, verbs or modifiers. We really discussed that. We talked about verb ing modifiers. Go to 5.7, 5.8. Go zoom in over there, Deepak. And again, there's an evaluation built right in there. That is there. Okay. Verb ed phrases, verbs or modifiers. You guys can really see that in 5.9 and 5.10. Again, the feedback tells you. And these are concept level questions. These are not application questions. And which is where it's important. Why? Because you're confident, you understand the concept. Then we teach you application. So if you go, Deepak, if you go on top and if you type application over there, just go to the search bar. Just do application. Okay, zoom it in. So these are all the places, if you zoom in, Deepak, these are all the places we teach you applications. These are just the application files. So you can see there's, depending on the length of this, you have either 1, 2, or 3 application files. For example, in modifiers, you have 3 different times you learn application. What's the green tick for revision? Should I go through everything again for revision? That's a great question, Naga. So the green tick is for you. So you can change the state of activity. So click on the tick mark and edit. I don't know if you'd be able to edit considering, yeah, you can mark it for revision. And if you mark it for revision, so later on, you really have that as something for revision. It's you based on the score, you may really say, hey, and this is something that you might really feel with a bunch of other people, with a bunch of concepts, really say, hey, I went through comparisons, I think I did okay, but I want to revise this sometime later because it didn't come as naturally to me. Does that happen with you guys? There are certain concepts that you feel you need to go through them again, and you don't want to go through them right away. You want to go through them a week down the line. Does that happen with folks? Marking that for revision is something which allows you to do that. And then when you do it again, you get that green tick. Okay. Let's go to the next stage of learning. Overall. And let's just add my video and Deepak's video again. All right. So once you know how to learn concepts, once you know how, I think, Deepak, I'm going to share my screen at this point over here, in this case. So once you know this, you want to do cementing. What does cementing mean? Cementing means, okay, I know all the concepts. I know how to apply them. Now I want to make sure that I can, solve kind of mixed quizzes in a representative fashion. A cementing quiz is a quiz of in which questions are of all various subsections. So for example, in sentence correction, you'll have a representative number of questions from subject, verb, verbs, pronouns, another representative set from modifiers, another representative set from comparisons and parallelism. These are 3 buckets that kind of are there in every exam from which questions are pulled in. And you want to make sure that when you get a quiz with mixed questions such as this, you're able to solve this. Okay. When do you do this? When your starting ability is around that 60th percentile overall. And again, if you're an eGMAT student, you get 10 questions. You get these cementing quizzes. I think you get about 10 cementing quizzes for hard, 10 for medium for each subsection. And if you're not an eGMAT student, if you want to do this, this is something where you can do this on GMAT Club, where you can really choose the difficulty level and you can use official questions as well. Okay. The key to cementing is achieving these scores, a baseline score of 70% in medium, a baseline score of 55%, accurate score of 55% in hardware. Medium quiz is, medium difficulty quiz, hard is hard difficulty quiz overall. But the key to this is not just these, but the fact that you need to have detailed solution. You need to really figure out where you're making a mistake, what's causing that mistake. And then the beauty of having a set process is, if you know what you need to do in step 1, what do you need to do in step 2 while answering a question, you can identify why you made a mistake, and you can go back and just revise that portion of it. When you do this round trip, what happens is you not only achieve that 55th percent accuracy, you start to get to that 70th percent accuracy in hard questions. When you do that, that's when you hit that 90th percentile ability. 70th percent accuracy in eGMAT hard questions, easily 90th percentile ability. Questions, Piyush, or others? Okay. Then stage 3, refine to perfection. This is what you're doing. This is your test readiness stage. Once you're done with one subsection, you go to another subsection, you're done with that. Come back, you want to make sure you don't forget things. That's a concern that you have. That's when you do test readiness quizzes. That's where you use a custom quiz engine where you have medium and hard difficulty. And Deepak, if you want to walk us through that, if you can. I'm going to stop sharing my screen. I'm going to remove that from streamer. You can remove my, yes.
I walk you guys through how can we make a custom quiz.
You're not sharing your screen, Deepak.
Just 1 second, it is coming.
Okay. Meanwhile, for those of you who are here, uh, do you see how these stages of learnings, I mean, how the kind of practice is different at each stage of learning? While Deepak pulls that up, and I know it's been an hour and a half since we started this. Okay. What type of questions, official or unofficial, do we recommend at cementing case? Piyush, you could use any questions. I think you need solutions that match the method of learning. The key thing over here is good quality questions, right difficulty, and solutions that are detailed with that allow you to build that error log. Deepak, you can log into any of the case study accounts as well. You just need to show the custom quiz engine for this.
My screen is not coming. I'm trying.
Okay, you need to share screen. Okay. Okay. I'm going to stop screen share. Now try again, share screen, maybe because I had to stop screen share. Yes, now we can really see. I can add your screen to stream. Good. So let's go to
So
create.
I'll walk you
Yeah.
through how can we make a custom quiz. So
Yeah.
suppose
Exam readiness, custom quiz.
So suppose you only want to make a medium plus hard questions, and you only want to create a sentence correction plus CR. You have not done RC yet, and you only want to create a sentence correction plus CR question. So you can select 10 questions here and 10 questions here.
I think Deepak
Then
just zoom it in a bit so that they can really see.
so I have selected medium plus hard level of difficulty. Sentence correction 10 questions. Critical reasoning 10 questions. Then the testing engine shows me that the recommended time in which I have to take this quiz is 35 minutes. Like go and click 35 minutes and it just makes a quiz here. So you press enter and the quiz starts. And you can customize it however you want.
Yes. And again, in SC, if you want to have to choose certain topics, Deepak, if you can expand the SC part over there, you can really see, say, okay, I don't want to worry about subject verb, but I want to focus just on pronouns and modifiers. So Deepak, if you can select pronouns and modifiers over there, you can really create that quiz over here. Okay. So this is
And
how,
then, yeah.
after every subsection, you can create that test readiness quiz. And as you go from SC to CR, CR to RC, you can really, as you build those test readiness quizzes, you can be certain that you don't forget what you've learned so far. Okay. So, any other question? All right. Now that you are test ready, let me just add this to stream. You can make a mock test. All right. I'm kind of not going to go through this, but now we're going to really talk about the various case studies that, let me hide this. I'm going to talk about the various case studies that that we have to really show that you've done this well. Okay. Let me remove this thing, and I'm going to stop screen sharing, Deepak, so you can walk through case studies as well. Actually, no, sorry, my bad.
Yeah.
Yes, let me share screen once again. So I'm going to talk about a few case studies over here. Let me hide this. So first case study is Jim. This guy got 770, improved from 700 to 770 over here. Now, for him, the issue really was he took the GMAT, he solved hundreds and hundreds of questions. He got a Q51, he excelled, and but you know, he excelled in quant but not in verbal, and he really said, I'm preparing for my second attempt, I'm pretty much finished. I mean, look at the number of questions he he solved. He did. I mean, Scholarinium has upwards of 1,000 questions in verbal. Actually, it's about 1,300 questions in verbal, another 1,300 in quant overall. Now, the thing that we had to do was, he said the guy got a 700. It's really good. He got a perfect score on quant, really good score on verbal. But we had to isolate that okay, why did he not get to a V34? What is the problem? And we isolated his problem to the fact that he scored 39 percentile in critical reasoning. We then worked with him. We had one session with him to really say, hey, we figured out where he was making a mistake. And we said he was really not following the pre-thinking approach. Even though we knew the concepts, he was not applying the method. So we said, here's a 15 to 20-day plan for you. Focus just on critical reasoning. And then from there on, you would be able to do well. Why? Because ultimately, all the other ability scores did match up. Okay. We created a targeted practicing.
Want to add here. He was a native speaker and his English was very good.
Yes. He was a Canadian. He's a Canadian. So okay. So he did targeted practice, and even though there were very few questions, he became test ready with regards to CR over here. And you can see from 17th of September to 6th of October, that improvement happened. Okay. Do you want to show
Yes.
the data? Okay. I'm going to stop sharing my screen. And Deepak. Add to stream. Yes.
So this is his debrief.
Yes.
So this is his debrief on GMAT Club. The heading says everything. Says that you need to trust the process, and the process is what the thing which took him from 700 to 770 in just about 3 weeks. So what main thing is for me is that he has attached two ESRs, and Rajat has compared his two ESRs. What was there in the ESR of 700 and what is there in the ESR of 770. So he started with a verbal score of 34, which is like 70th percentile, and then he reached to a verbal score of 42, a 96th percentile score in just about say 3 weeks, which is not a very long time. But what I need you to focus is just see his critical reasoning ability. I mean, he was at 39th percentile in his first year. Sir.
I think
He
Deepak, you
reached,
need to zoom in to that. So I think you can zoom into the image over there. Yes.
he is at 39th percentile in critical reasoning in his first year, sir. And then he went to 94 in 3 weeks. What I want again to mention is that he exhausted all his Polaranium questions already, and this happened just by doing focused practice with focused revision. So what we did is yeah,
And also following the method, doing pre-thinking.
yes. So
If you
he didn't. Yeah,
go ahead.
so he didn't follow pre-thinking method while solving critical reasoning the first time. So we forced him to follow pre-thinking method because that was the only thing which was lacking in his ESR, in his GMAT throughout the journey. So his timing also improved, and then just see the accuracy, just see the improvement in his accuracy. He made so many mistakes in second block in the first attempt, but in second attempt he uh, performed really well. In third block, his accuracy was 100%. His accuracy improved a whole lot, and which says a lot about the how can you trust the process, because this is the process which can take you just by applying the process. He reached from a score of 700 to 770, and yeah, Rajat.
Yeah, I think so. That part is there. So again, this is where right kind of practice at the right time. The guy knew the concepts. He had to focus on learning the application. He didn't learn the concepts again. He focused on application, and then he focused on very specific practice, and didn't take a whole lot of time. So that's the value of doing the right thing at the right time over there. Now we're going to do another case study of a student called Utkarsh. So let me actually share my screen again, and over here. And for him, he took his first Sigma X mock let me hide this on, you can see on 16 December, and he scored a 650 over here. Okay, so prior to taking that first Sigma X mark, he spent a bunch of time studying, still ended up with a 650. Okay, um, and then from there on, Deepak, I think this is you. You guys worked with him closely. No, you can really talk about the slide over here.
So what we did is we told him that he required some plan which can take him to a score of 740, 750 because his target score was 750. What good thing about him was that he was very focused on the strategy part. So he said that whatever you will tell me, I will just do the same thing and I will not deviate from the strategy. This is what the assurance he gave to us. So what we did is we made him a plan. The plan was basically to get to step by step. So in his Sigma X mock, the first mock he scored 650. So we got to know that verbal is his weakness. So he needed to work on verbal a lot. So we made him a plan that you need to go to sentence correction stage one first, then you get to stage two, then you get to critical reasoning stage one, then critical reasoning stage two, then you get to stage three, which is mixed practice for sentence correction and critical reasoning. So what he did was he did focused learning and targeted practice.
And I think
And
we're
then
gonna demonstrate that for him. But I think the piece
yes,
over here is from 6th of December. So people ask how much time do I need, to 25th of February is when he scored a 750 overall. Again, you can really see his mocks progress over here. He's even scored a 790 internally, and we're going to really see what was the data behind it. So, and this was the email that that he really said. So let's kind of look at the data, look at how he went through various stages of learning through his overall journey. And I'm going to remove myself. I'm going to stop screen share.
shared my screen.
Yes, I think you should be able to share your screen. I'm going to add. Yes.
Let's start with stage one. Stage one is how you go through the concept. So what I want you to focus here is his scores. Concept quiz 100%, practice quiz 100%. Then you must be thinking that he has attempted twice or thrice. He has not. So as you see, the time spent, we talked about it. We talked about this earlier as well. That if the time spent is more, then you make multiple attempts. But here the time spent is very less. This essentially suggests that he did this all only once. So, and he got that right the first time because he was following the right strategy. He was making diligent notes, and then he was revising everything on a continuous basis. So, and this
I just want to add one thing. When you get people like these are for us dream students. I'll tell you this, because these are people who we can guide and we can trust that they're going to execute on this, and we don't mind guiding this as long as you execute on it, because we know when you execute and when you hit these metrics over there, 100%, 96%, these are aggregate metrics. Deepak, if you want to highlight those metrics, the and yeah, these are aggregate of these over here. So so these are concept quizzes that you have. When you get these metrics, we know you're going to do well, because we have data of tens of thousands of students who do well over here and who do well in Scholarium, and then they do well in the test. We also have data of tens of thousands of students who do not do well over here despite our feedback, and who do not do well on the test. So it works. This is a sword that cuts both ways. You do well here, you're going to do well on the test. You don't do well here, you're going to mess up on the test. Okay, this is
let's go
the
to
beauty of data when you look at this. So let's go
let's
to
go
this.
to stage two.
Yes.
What he did in stage two, what he did in Solomon.
Hmm.
So first, I want you to focus is the number of questions he solved. See the total number of questions he solved. It's just 483 questions. That's it. And in 483 questions, he was able to reach to a score 100-point improvement, able to reach to a score of 750 from 650. So, and then the second piece is you check the accuracies. Medium quiz, as Rajat mentioned, the target accuracy is just 70%, but his accuracy was above 80% all the time. And in hard quizzes, you remember that the target accuracy is 55%. But here his accuracy is above 60%, above 70%. In RC, it is above 75%. He was performing really well. So as Rajat mentioned that if you reach 70% accuracy in hard, you get to 90 percentile. He did that. So he reached to 70% accuracy in hard quizzes, and he reached to 90th percentile as well. But now some of you may be also wondering that anyone can reach good accuracy if you give good enough time. So let's see the skill data piece where we show how much time is required to solve on an average, each question. So in sentence correction, he took a minute and 27 seconds. In CR, it is a minute 49 seconds. And in RC, it is a minute and a half. All these three are less than the ideal time. So in sentence correction, it is 90 seconds. He solved it in 87 seconds. So he solved with good accuracy and in less time.
I
Now
think the
let's see
thing,
how
but I think the thing which was there is this was only possible because he did well in stages 1 and 2.
he
Had he,
did
because
well.
he's the same guy who spent 6 months prior to that learning, couldn't do this, but he did well in stages 1 and 2, and that's the value that the value of doing well over there is what you see over here.
So now let's see, go through his attempts, how he did that. So
I think
yeah,
we are about towards the end, but we'd be happy to do that. I think Deepak, let's not go through the attempts piece right now. I think 90 minutes is usually my limit for these sessions, and I want to just talk about one other piece over here, in this, which is that how many of you remember this guy? How many of you remember this guy over here? Let's kind of get some more inputs. How many of you remember this guy? Okay, 12K guy, beginning guy, yes. And you can really see 8th December 2019. After 3 months of structured study, this is where he was. He was able to improve to a 720. This is what structure, metrics, following through these stages of learning does. And you can see the date over here. Okay. So, final takeaways. What should you do next? First thing, define that's those stages of learning for you. Take a Sigma X mock. I'll share the link to a Sigma X mock. Define those stages of learning. Figure out your starting abilities. Over there. Let me just do that. Second thing, create that personalized study plan and do that and commit to executing on that plan. And you can do that after you take a Sigma X mock by going towards our PSP link. Over here. And then follow the stages of learning, hit those metrics in there. And again, if you hit those metrics, you get those subsectional abilities. If you get those subsectional abilities, you get your target GMAT score. With that, I want to thank you guys for joining me today. Any questions that you have, I'd be happy to take those at this point in time. Or Deepak can take those. Thank you, Shorty. I don't know what your real name is, but hopefully I'm not offending you by saying that. And again, if you guys like this, press the like button. If you don't like it, also tell us why you don't like it. We would appreciate that as well. We, as data-driven instructors, we thrive on feedback. I know. Thank you guys for being there. I know this is very late in some parts of the world, or if you are in the US like me, it's work time for you. So we do understand that. I think this time works best for Europe. They're kind of done with work. Shubham says, I've learned all concepts. I have solved all OG questions, but still struggle with 600 plus and 700 plus questions. What resources should I use? Shubham, I think you have to answer this question. Why is it that you still struggle? Write to me at rajat@e-gmat.com. Let me actually use it through our eGMAT account. And again, we'll send you some recording of a few sessions for you to understand where you're making a mistake, why you're faltering a mistake. Now, this is not a subject matter session, but when we send you the recording of a subject matter session, I have seen people say, it was like, I don't know why I don't focus on these things. I know the concepts. What I can tell you is 90% of the folks that we deal with, they have a good understanding of the concepts. Do scores greater than 51 on a scale of 60 ever pop up? No. Today, no. That's there. Piyush, how do you approach the test as the accuracy of SC question doesn't determine the difficulty of next year question? You have to achieve those ability scores individually. I think that's the beauty of it, right? Piyush, so when you say how do you approach the test, what exactly are you really saying? Are you saying how you approach your preparation, or are you saying how you approach once you get in the test? Because once you get in the test, you don't have a choice. Questions are served to you. You've got to solve them, or you've got to really just randomly mark and move forward if you think you can't solve them. However, while you're preparing, prepare one subsection at a time, achieve that 70th percentile ability or 80th percentile before you move on to next subsection. No. Yes, achieve mastery and then move. So Rahul, your question is right. So that says I have to start applying from next year and have a busy college schedule. When should I start preparing? So that I think it's a question that you have to answer. One thing that I will tell you is, regardless of when you do this, you are going to find that you have to make time for your GMAT. All right. Here is and so you have to make changes to your schedule. For example, here's Jimmy, a success story, and you really see scoring 770 despite working full time, or while working full time. It's you have to make time. We get a lot of students who take the GMAT while they are in college, and that way they have a score that's valid for 5 years, and then that's they're set for it. So my only response to you is, if you decide to study now, make sure you are consistent. You study every day. Make sure you kind of decide what will you not do from your daily routine, and to make that time. Or if you decide you can't do that now, then don't do it now. The only wrong thing in this is you decide that you're going to study and you don't do it consistently. That's wastage of time. That's the only wrong answer here.
So that I want to add one thing. Start by taking a Sigma X mock and then see where it goes. Compare it with today's session, what you have learned, and then you will get to know how much time you require in your preparation and where do you want to focus.
I agree. That's a good suggestion. Let's figure out how much time you need. All right. If there are no other questions, then I truly appreciate you guys for joining me in this webinar. Thank you very much. I got another question. Okay, I'm going to take Kanishka Raj's question. So it's around the 8th of September today. Kanishka, the answer depends on what you're again. I think I'll go with Deepak's answer. Take a Sigma X mock. That will help us estimate how much time you need, and then we can tell you is taking a test in November, given how much effort you can put in, even a possibility. You can write to us and we can do an estimate. How do you stay focused and not give up? It's not an off the track question. It's probably the most important question over there. And it's a difficult thing. I will tell you this. I'm going to show this question. I will tell you this is difficult. This is not easy if you're working full time and doing this. I think the way you have to imagine this is to really say, hey, look at some career transformation. One thing that I did when I did my MBA, and I had a full fellowship. One thing I did was I looked at career transformations to really say, this is what I'm doing now. This is what I want to do. Here is evidence of people who've gone through an MBA and have done that. So the question that I have to ask myself is, do I want to do this for the rest of my life, or do I want to make a change? I think that's a question that you have to answer. And if you have to make a change, then how will you go about making that change? Write it down. Don't just think it in your mind. If you think you're going to spend 200 hours preparing for the GMAT, spend 2 hours writing what you would do and what you would not do. Both of those are really important. Tell yourself that essentially that you are going to face these difficulties, and when that happens, I would say go to our YouTube channel, watch success stories. The beauty of going on our YouTube channel and watching success stories, and we have upwards of, I think, close to 100 success stories right now on our YouTube channel, is that you can really see people who've been in your shoes. Let me actually share success stories, the list of success stories over there. And these are narrated videos that you see over here. And a lot of people do that. Aniket says, I've gone through all verbal concepts and strategies. When it comes to answering question, I just end up going by whether it sounds correct. Any tip for me? Don't end up. Just when you want to solve SC, make sure you extract all aspects of the meaning from the passage. Sounding right, SC is not about sounding right. SC is about communicating what the author intends to communicate in the most precise manner. Okay, so please do not SC. I mean, SC is not a test of grammar. SC is a test of precise communication or logic. If you want to know how do you communicate precisely, just share this link with you.
Someone is asking, are all the questions from OG quant enough? Quantum quantum? Yes, they are enough if you get good solutions to it.
Yes, they are enough if they get good solutions. I mean, there are people who don't even do the whole of OG Quant and Excel. On the other hand, there are folks who actually need way more questions. That depends on who you are. I think one thing which is there is, and I tell people, what doesn't matter. It doesn't matter whether you need a month or 4 months to prepare. What matters is that the score that you get, because in the end, a 760 is a 760 regardless of how much time you spend preparing. And that's something which is really important overall. And you've got to understand that a 760 is a 760. Here is a girl. Let me just share my screen over here, and I'm going to stop sharing, and I'm going to share screen once again and do this, and let's go to Asta success story. Where is it? So this girl essentially took the GMAT thrice. Does it matter? She took it thrice. She got into Kellogg. She got a scholarship from Kellogg overall. This guy took the GMAT thrice. In the third attempt, he got a 750. Actually, probably 4 times. But when he got a 750, he got scholarships from Ross and Columbia. Does it matter that he took the GMAT 4 times? No, it doesn't. Okay, what matters is that end score. What matters is that methodical approach. Does that help? Again, you want to when you talk about keeping yourself motivated, look at those success stories. Look at, these are people who are just like you, and how their lives were transformed. Okay. All right, guys. With that, I want to thank everyone for joining me today. Again, if you like this session, press the like button. Somewhat for me, but more so for Deepak. It's his first session, and I hope to see you guys on eGMAT.com. We have a fantastic free trial that you can make use of if you're not already registered on eGMAT.com. Let me just share the link to our free trial as well. So you get a bunch of things over there. Here's the link that you can click on. All right, with that, I will see you guys in our next webinar.
Thank you for
Goodbye
doing.
and have a great day.